Thank you very much for having me at One Society and this fantastic event and talk you through how we can create trusted records, deeds, and credentialing for future continuous learning. So, well, let me frame the talk in the context of the future of work. By 2030, the 75% of the workforce is expected to be made up of millennials who are hyper-connected, tech-savvy, and of course, have an attitude to work that is completely different. Second point to consider is that the 90% of jobs already today require IT skills, and this is a trend that is not going to stop, and certainly IT skills will never change, will never be the same, so require constant updating and information. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for having me to One Society. I'm super happy today to be with you and walk you through how we can create trusted records, deeds, and credentialing for ongoing learning. Well, let me frame the talk in the context of the future of work. By 2030, we expect to have 75% of the workforce made up of millennials who are hyper-connected, tech-savvy, and of course have an attitude completely different towards work. Second point I want to make is that an estimated 90% of today's jobs already require IT skills, and this is not something to end. In the EU, unfortunately, there are 61 million people who do not have adequate basic skills. So there is a problem today to reskill them, but also tomorrow to continuously update skills of future workers. Lifelong learning and skills-based education will become the norm, and is becoming already intrinsic to the evolution of education. New technologies and the availability of information are making the sentence "I don't know" absolutely obsolete. Creating new skills and knowledge possibilities is now the norm for every day. Some 20 to 30% of working age population, approximately 160 million in Europe and in the US, are engaged in some kind of independent work. And this is a trend that is going to increase more and more, because according to the ability of each of us to improve our skills and to meet the requirements of a faster moving labor market. The meaning also of the workplace is completely changing. Everyone can work from wherever today. COVID made it absolutely evident. This means that we can virtualize more and more work, and therefore all what is related to hiring must also be virtualized. 60% of our high skills will come from Asia by 2030, and this is something that we cannot avoid to consider. This takes the problem of trust and prejudice linked to the emerging countries may significantly decrease if we are able to create a global labor market with standardized hiring processes. The decentralization of work and the hierarchical structure that we are used to see in companies is slowly shifting to developing a kind of self-accountability and entrepreneurship within the workforce. Work is shifting from routine to quick task-based project work, and this makes that the relationship is between workers and employers and needs to shift to something more peer-to-peer. already today, but this is a trend that is going to change to increase significantly. Already today, we are no more just a name and a surname and a degree and a couple of jobs, right? What today's worker delivers to the employer is the result of multiple learning opportunities, most informal, added to what is an alternation of fixed and temporary jobs that see us in some case experts and in some case beginners, probably also simultaneously. We are more and more at the same time learners and workers and experts in a continuous alternation of job opportunities, learning opportunities, extensively offered, in some cases also free of charge. Every individual willing to increase his or her value on the labor market face the challenge not really to learn, because learning is very easily accessible if we want, but the challenge is to demonstrate that we possess a certain skill and the level at which these skills are at a certain point in time. So that's where credentialing and how credentials are verifiable comes in. So let's start the core of our conversation with talking of trusted records. Then we will move to credentials, how credentials are perceived and what are they today, deeds and blockchain-based credentialing. So what are trusted records? Basically, well, the name says that trusted records is a record that can be that is trustworthy. From where derives the trustworthiness? Well, basically from 4 elements: reliability, authenticity, integrity, and usability. What is reliability? Well, a reliable record is one whose content can be trusted as a full and accurate representation of a transaction. Or, well, I call transaction whatever is a fact or an activity. Authenticity is referred to a record that is proven to be what it purports to be, and to have been created by the person or sent by the person who purports to have created it or sent it. A record should be created at the point in time of the transaction or fact to which it is related, or soon afterwards. So by individuals who have the direct knowledge, who knows or who did it, or eventually by instruments that are used within the business to conduct a certain transaction. To demonstrate the authenticity of records, organizations should implement and document policies and procedures which control the creation, the transmission, the receipt, and the maintenance of a record, so that they can ensure that records creators are effectively authorized and identified, that and that the record is protected from against any unauthorized addition or deletion or alteration, if you want. So when we talk of integrity, well, this is referred to a record that refers to being impossible to be altered. Records management policies and procedures are expected to specify what additions may be made to a record after it is created, and under what circumstances additions may be authorized, and who is authorized to make them. Another aspect of integrity is the structural integrity of a record. This is its physical and logical format, which should remain intact. Failure to maintain the structural integrity brings prejudice to the reliability and authenticity of the record. When we talk of usability, well, then we refer to a record that can be located. It can be retrieved, it can be presented, and it can be interpreted in any subsequent retrieval, we should be capable to directly connect that record to the business activity or transaction which produced it. So what are the challenges today of trustworthy records? Well, first of all, the documents and records are dependent upon specific hardware and software systems and the combination of the two. So the platform, in the platform economy, when we use a platform, you basically delegate to that platform some aspects of the security of data, and of course how you adapt it to the system that is proposed by for recording that is proposed by the platform. Second point, there is a great risk for potential security breaches and the damage derived from virus attacks. And there are also significant risks in the loss and damage that is potentially possible. From an employment perspective, trusted records, such as award certificates, have been always been the part of a hiring procedures. But proliferation of informal learning today, most of which do not follow an agreed standard, increases challenges for an authenticated record sharing. Moreover, employers and education providers have not yet found the way to interoperate to the benefit of both ecosystems. So what are credentials? What are digital credentials? In the educational space, which is the object of the conversation today, these are electronic or paper-based representation of different types of learning acquired by an individual. The current state of art is that we do not really have an efficient national or global system to collect credentials, to connect, to search, to compare, and to update, to keep updated information about learning. And credentials. So we do not have a common language or a format that can be universally understood and easily accessed. This harmonization is key to every stakeholders involved in the education process. In fact, education and training providers need learning data to build new programs and learn from learning pathways. So employers need the data, of course, to understand where to find and who to hire. And learners and the workers need the data to discern which learning pathway are more likely to lead to the career they want. Although there are a number of efforts in terms of creating taxonomy standards, one example can be ESCO, for example, in the UE, in the European Union, and in filling up a CV, like, for example, again, EPAS, another European initiative, we are still very far from real work together with the participation of industries and the education. And this, this lack of information contributes to confusion, contributes to increase the lack of trust and make decision-making subjective and recognition of the skills and qualifications is complicated. It is also leading to talent loss for economies and for employers, and which is the most important thing. Not last to users, it costs money and time loss in the verification side. As a result, the end user has to use different systems to access different data from many sources. Had who had the ambition to gather all to verify credentials from all universities in the UK, says that the incompatibility and interoperability of credentials is a huge problem, and there have been some efforts to overcome the issues, but these are not enough. A couple of examples of how credentialing today doesn't really work well and needs to change. Well, let's talk about the healthcare space, for example. Credentialing of doctors and nurses takes over 90 days, and frequently is even not possible to verify the full set of credentials of a doctor, for example, from Ghana or from emerging countries. The average, another point that makes us thinking is that the average physician spends approximately 40 minutes a day, every day, just in admin tasks. Time that, of course, the doctor or the physician would love to dedicate to his patients and not to administrative tasks. In the hiring process, well, let's forget the non-healthcare space. An intern, for example, my nephews from Italy, coming to the UK for an internship, spent 90 days before seeing his credential approved and verified. So in terms of cost, in terms of time, credentialing is definitely a loss. And most importantly, the UK is a typical example because they quantified that companies spend 6 billion per year, 6 billion pounds per year in wasted salaries, because part of this wasted salary means salaries to employees or new hiring that leave the company within the first 4 weeks from hiring. And this is a demonstration that probably there is something wrong in identifying the right candidates. Third point that makes us think of the fake credentialing industry, which is today worth 1.3 billion US dollars, which is an example of which can be, for example, the pilot from Indigo, who was found not having any authorization license for flying, but well, he had one, but it was fake, and this was only discovered when he had an accident. Or the doctor in Australia who pretended to be an expert in fertility matters and operated for 20 years and finally was found that he was a charlatan. So there is a huge problem around credentialing that needs to be adapted to a new digital world and to a workforce that is moving more and more online and working practices that are more and more virtualized. So what is EDID? Well, we are in the space of identity, right? Here, the existing identity management systems are based on centralized authorities. An easy example is, of course, the passport, which is generated by the government and ruled by a system that allows you to use it as identification everywhere, wherever you go. And the centralized identifier, or as we say it, EDID, is a globally unique identifier that does not require a centralized registration authority because it is registered with the distributed ledger technology. And to refer to something that we all know, it is a URL that points to a DID document. So a cryptographically secure system which respects privacy and is machine verifiable. These IDs can represent the same information that a physical credential represents, but the added blockchain, the added value of blockchain technology is that they become more trustworthy. So what is behind EDID? What are the components? Components are, well, a holder, an issuer, a subject, a verifier, and a verifiable data registry. So an issuer, the issuer, of course, is the entity that creates the verifiable credential and associated it with a specific subject and transmit it to a holder. The verifier, so the subject, sorry, I was talking about the holder is the entity that possesses the verifiable credentials. The issuer is the entity that creates the credentials. The subject may be sometimes the same as the holder, so is the entity that might have one or more verifiable credential, and the verifier is the entity that requests the credential and receive a verifiable representation that proves that the holder possesses the required verifiable credential. The verifiable data registry is a system mediating the creation and the verification of identifiers, keys, and any other relevant data. DID methods are the mechanism by which a DID and its DID-associated document are created, can be read, can be updated, and can be deactivated within on a specific distributed ledger or network. In order to enable the full functionality of DIDs and DID documents, a DID method's specification must define how all operations are. So like creating, reading, updating, and deactivating. So why blockchain is particularly a good fit for education? Well, the blockchain is a long chain of linked data items, right, that are stored on every participating computer, where the next item can only be added by consensus of a majority of those that participate. There are public blockchains that anyone can access and potentially add to, and there are private blockchain used within an organization or a consortium. I would not enter into the detail here. However, the blockchain has some properties that make it particularly a good fit for creating ecosystems and enabling all participants to the ecosystem to benefit of it. First of all, the entire record is distributed over a wide network of participating computers, and so it is resilient to loss of infrastructure. It is possible to confirm the identity of any addition or modification of the record. So if you want to change or if you want to falsify, well, it's quite hard because you are supposed to do it on all copies. And once a block has been added by consensus among all participants, it cannot be removed or altered, even by the original authors. So immutable and forever. The events are publicly accessible, but not publicly readable without a digital key, and that is the privacy aspect. To give you a practical example of how blockchain credentials can be generated and benefit each of us in the context of education, I will show you briefly how Certifs works. One and Verif, the two systems that we have developed with TQ in the space of credentialing. So here what you see is a number of the certificates, the typical certificates of a university degree, and here you see the system Certif, which basically convert these the content of these certificates into cryptographically secured data. This is the conversion of these information into a hash. This little line here is the hash, a string that is alphanumeric that can be calculated from a set of information, but cannot be backlinked to the original data. And what the system does is that takes the cryptographically certificate hash from thousands of hash of certificates together and assemble them in a batch and publish this string to the blockchain. So first of all, as we said, it cannot be changed. And if you want to change, if you change any of these certificates because you want to fake a certificate and you take the one of your friend and you change the name, well, this operation would change the hash. And because then it is published in batches, the system, it is impossible for anyone to change simultaneously all the hashes, and so that the new hash is also changing and then can be transferred to all computers. So what it happens, the benefit of doing this is that when the certificate is sent to the individual to his and stored on his professional passport, well, this you see it as a very classical PDF, but it contains metadata that send back the verifier, whoever want to verify the veracity, integrity of that certificate, send to Verif, and here it can be imported, and when it is imported, it is the information, the metadata is matched against the proof that is published to the blockchain, and the verifier will see one page, so a new page, if the certificate is true, saying the certificate is verified, or a red page saying the certificate is falsified or has been modified. So this make it possible for the verifier to be sure that the certificate you have eventually shared is valid, is true, and was effectively issued by who pretended, who was entitled to issue it. At a global level, there are a number of relevant, so that's how it works, and where derives the immutability and the trustworthiness of blockchain-based credentialing. At the global level, there are a number of relevant projects in the space of credentialing and ID management with the blockchain. This cover educational credentials, land property, identity, and many others, many IP, and many other aspects. And also there are a number of consortiums that are heavily investing in creating those standards that we were talking about just a little bit earlier about trusted records. And these organisms, these organizations, this consortium will pave the way to wider adoption of blockchain-based systems. One example, one of among the many, is the World Web Consortium, which is an international community that have members, organizations as members who work together to develop web standards. The reason why this is a global trend and is that it can significantly solve the problem of cyber risks and privacy that are associated with the increasingly virtualized and globalized world of work, but business, I would say, and can help, significantly help all of us getting closer to a 5G powered infrastructure, which will increase exponentially the number of data exposed to cyber risks. So I close my presentation with a reflection for all of you. the adoption of new methods for protecting our privacy and our security will certainly rely on having standards in place and having companies and governments involved in the process, in how records are created. But it is also strictly related to the degree at which all of us as citizens become part of the process and become accountable for and say our word about how data are used or consumed or distributed. My question to you is, are you happy to be a product? Because if you are not, the way the internet will be shaped can be influenced by yourself, by how you act towards the data that you generate. You can take action. You can decide whether or not authorizing the use of your data. You can choose to whom you give your data, and you can own your personal data and collect them in a wallet from where you decide to whom you want to share them and with for which purpose. As the future of the internet relies on how we take action with platforms, in the same way, the future of work is in our hands. It is strictly related to how we build up our professional reputation, collecting credentials that can be trusted. So I think I close it here. I'm very happy to take questions. You can contact me at Deja Laura on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for having me again, and I hope this was a useful talk. Thanks again.